Okay, I think we're all set. So we're going to kick off this section with a presentation from Siena Gordillo from Boston University. And the presentation topic is about reimagining Gen Z fashion and making trendy, sustainable clothing. And so I'm going to stop sharing and turn the floor over to Siena.
Hey, good morning. Let me just share this real quick. All right. Okay. So what I wanted to talk about today, and something that's always been very dear to me, is Gen Z fashion and maintaining its sustainability when so much exists that would kind of shut it out. And so I'll go more into that right now. Okay, so a bit about me. I grew up in New York City, and I grew up very privileged in a sense that thrifting clothing was far more trendy than you would think. It was deeply ingrained into my high school experience, where cool clothing was what you thrifted nearby. I grew up near a bunch of different, Goodwill, Salvation Army, as well as the city kind of glorified this idea, and it's made it way more normal and way more cute. And because of this, I've kind of been able to build an entire closet just based on secondhand clothing. And because of that, I've been very, very, very passionate about maintaining that throughout my life. And so going into college, that's been something that I've noticed, is that finding cost-efficient shopping while remaining sustainable can be very difficult. And so as a result, I've turned to websites such as Depop, Poshmark, ThredUp that have made it, a lot easier to not only sell my clothes, but to buy more that are trendy, sustainable, etc. And so a bit of what I wrote here is Generation Z has shifted a large focus onto secondhand clothing sources and taken thrifting to the next level. And so I've mentioned where I grew up that this was a clothing staple. You see on TikTok, you see everywhere. And a lot of what people will say is, oh, I thrifted this piece. And I say that for myself a lot as well. And so with that, modern fashion trends have paid homage to retro styles, which includes 80s, 90s, early 2000s, and this Y2K core. So what we're seeing is that fashion is being consistently recycled. It's not necessarily being reinvented like with a blank slate. It's being recycled throughout generations and throughout decades, that while clothing might evolve in the way that it is purchased might evolve, the general style is remaining consistent. And so the future of fashion, I believe, is now on apps such as Depop that allow people anywhere to list their clothing and create a casual online storefront. And for me, as a college student, making money while selling my clothes, while also buying new ones, all of that is incredibly appealing with websites such as Depop, ThredUp, etc. So a bit more, and this is where we get into the sustainability aspect of it, the numbers. And I'm going to talk a little bit about fast fashion and this idea of greenwashing and how it's, kind of taken over. And a lot of where I'm headed with this is that the way sustainability is marketed to Generation Z makes all the difference, as in, I'll get into that. So fast fashion makes up about 88% of the clothing industry in the United States. And the fashion industry overall is said to be responsible for about 10% of global carbon emissions. And if no action is taken, this number could increase to around 60%, which seems a little bit bizarre to say. But if you look at all of the, photos of brands that I've put here, you have Urban Outfitters, Adidas, Reformation, Forever 21. And while all of these kind of are on this ebb and flow of popularity in society, especially amongst younger generations, it still stands that these are the easiest and now cheapest ways to get clothing. And so while these are just basic statistics, they still kind of do delineate a lot of where we stand currently with fashion trends. And so I wanted to point out how there are, with brands such as Zara, and Zara is one of the leading, polluting fast fashion companies that currently exists. And so Zara has this initiative where they are allowing you to bring donation. They're allowing you to donate clothes in bins in their stores. There are some other brands that also have this, that you can donate when you go into their store. And there's no really incentive there to do it other than you want to donate and you want to get rid of some clothing and you want to give to people. And so here's what's promoted on their website. You know, you have 17K tons of clothing donated in 2002. More than 90 nonprofit organizations are benefited. And they're promoting this, you know, very positive outlook on clothing donation. And this has kind of been what they've latched onto as a company that has made them more environmentally sustainable or acceptable for what they are already doing. Whereas if you look at the reality of it, they are one of the leading pollutants. And this goes for a lot of other companies as well that share that similar mindset where they're doing just enough. And so a bit of what I wanted to highlight is that a lot of companies are being dubbed not good enough in the environmental sustainability category. However, they're not necessarily actively harming. And I'm talking about companies such as Princess Polly, Aritzia, that you might have heard about, but that are really up and coming, especially on apps such as TikTok, etc. And so while they express commitment to sustainable development goals, there is little tangible evidence that these popular companies are actually taking action. And so, especially for brands with, you know, an ever-growing interest base and fan base, it's vital that they lead by example. And so one that I wanted to highlight that I thought was really interesting was, you know, Jerf Avenue by influencer Matilda Jerf. And this is just one company that's kind of doing what is and work in the direction that fashion should be, is that so Matilda Jerf is an influencer, pretty popular on TikTok, and her clothing brand produces solely recycled clothing in Portugal, Sweden, and Italy. And not only that, but Jerf Avenue has its own resale branch where shoppers can resell their clothing. And it has to be specific to the brand. Nonetheless, it still is a way for customers to make money off of their clothing and for it to be completely recycled in this process. And so moving on, you know, I have worked with a lot of small businesses and I've seen, you know, how this process kind of works. And as a result, I wanted to create something or have some kind of idea that not only ties in the trendy aspect of it, but that incentivizes people to donate and to be more sustainable, not just because, you know, it's the right thing to do, but because they're incentivized by people around them and by wanting newer clothing and by on their own developing a passion that ties in fashion with sustainability. And so a bit of what I wanted to talk about was creating some kind of platform that is a point system, essentially, that incentivizes youth generations on similar apps to Depop or ThreadUp, where, you know, they can become creators of their own clothing. And by donating their own textiles and previously worn clothes, they are then receiving points or discounts in that category that allows them to make their own clothing or to purchase clothing that already exists. And so they can promote trendy styles by allowing buyers to create their own outfits and model their designs, etc. And I think, you know, a lot of why brands such as Jerf Avenue are successful is because they're marketing properly to generations that have that specific kind of style, or allowing people to have their own. That's not just boxing them into something already existing. And so the process will be, you know, identifying viable textiles in somebody's closet, pieces of clothing, reporting their condition, adding photos of the clothing being donated. And then once you send in the clothing or find a nearby donation box for the specific platform, or there's given proof, points or discounts can be redeemed online. And thus this starts this cycle of someone donates, they receive points, and then they can create something. And a lot of what I wanted to talk about is how, like, technology is advancing, so this is a possibility. And this next slide is just, I was going to include some of my own designs, but these are some AI created ones that are very loosely based off of the ones that I have. And I thought it was important, not necessarily to shift the whole focus onto, AI, et cetera, but to emphasize that there is technology out there that already exists that allows people to create their own clothing and to form this kind of cyclical process of you donate and you create. And so where does this leave us and why does this matter? It emphasizes that the fashion industry has infinite possibilities and the technological advances open doors for, involvement in such a thing, for Generation Z to be more involved in the clothing that they are purchasing. And so since trends usually recycle themselves anyways, selling platforms should cater to this rather than just try to keep up with new trends. And so with that, thank you for listening. And that was something that was I'm very passionate about in terms of blending the two, that you can make sustainable fashion and you can make it for everybody.
Thank you so much, Siena, for that presentation. I was really excited when we received your pitch for your presentation, and I was looking forward to it. But I was also so excited that you brought up some topics I wasn't expecting you to talk about. That I was literally just thinking last night, like, oh shoot, we don't have someone talking about this. But I think greenwashing is such an important topic for thinking about issues in this space. And AI is also such an interesting issue to think about the potentials for that to either really solve some problems in this space or maybe also to create some new ones. So thank you so much for your presentation. And now I just want to open up the floor for any questions.
I have a question.
Thank you, Siena. Too.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Siena, for your wonderful presentation. It's wonderful to see that someone is very passionate about sustainable fashion. A question for me that comes up is, you have stated that there's already an existing market for sustainable fashion, but marketing is a huge role in this. I know you talked about some apps. What do you think are some ways in which we can better publicize these kinds of brands and these kinds of companies which are sustainable?
Yeah, I mean, already there is a growing platform online for this. And I think part of what I wanted to incorporate is this idea of, you're incentivizing through like monetary aspects, which I know for my situation and my generation and our generation as a whole is also very important. This, idea of you donate and you get a financial substitute for it and you're able to explore that more. And so I think marketing for the creation of clothing that comes from all generations and kind of trying to find that niche online, whether it be on different social media platforms or through the website itself, is probably the most important way. And I think sharing this idea of individualized creation is what I would hope to put out there. And I think that, apps such as Depop have already kind of done that. They allow for, you can add little tabs of what kind of style you're looking for, who you're trying to emulate. And I think that if people are given more of the creative freedom to do so, there is a lot more incentive to donate, and there's a lot more incentive to just take part in that kind of process. And I think when you have influencers that are already establishing that, it's very showing, and it delineates that there is a possibility for this. So
Thank you for that question and that response. I didn't see who it was, but someone else also had a question.
Hi, your presentation was very nice. I have a question about starting this point of view from early childhood. Nowadays, the child and kindergartens have some celebration and some things that they started mode of clothes from early childhood, and maybe starting it from those days when you are very in the start of thinking about clothes, about sustainable environment. What do you think about this way?
About incorporating like more like youth clothes, or just that specifically?
I mean, the understanding, the cognitive understanding of the importance of clothes and sustainable sustainability in our environment. It comes from our early childhood experiences. And what do you think about your method, your understanding, your style of thinking about early childhood education in this way?
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, I was very fortunate to like grow up in a place where sustainability was a priority. And especially being in a big city, there are so many ways that that's prioritized, and helping and giving back is prioritized. And I think that especially in early education, I noticed that there is a lack of, there'll be like casual like Earth Day, environmental days, etc. But beyond that, it's very performative. And I think that where I'm at is with this, all kinds of clothing could be recycled, but it's what I also want to do is kind of expand that a little bit and to market towards younger people. And obviously that's difficult to market towards children, but once this is established, kind of figure out how schools can take part. And I remember when I was younger, there would be days where you donate like certain things, or like it becomes like a classroom game a little bit, who can donate the most. And I think once fashion and once textile use is incorporated within that, and there is more of this like donation mindset within classrooms and within schools especially, and like environmental sustainability is just more talked about, period, because it's really not as much as we like to think it is. I think once that is done, there is more of a tangible reality to actually like raise money and to donate regularly and make that part of somebody's upbringing. And that became evident to me once I got into high school, and it became more ingrained in like trends. But I think that it could start way before that, and it could become, a very like youth-minded oriented thing.
Great, thank you for that really interesting question. And I actually think that is a great point to end this this presentation Q&A section on, because I think our next presentation actually explores that question to at least to some extent. And then I also wanted to mention that our principal investigator for the Aftermath Learning Lab, Julia Devoy, is a developmental psychologist, and she thinks a lot about that question, and she will be speaking later in the conference. So maybe Julia, you will have a chance to kind of also chime in your thoughts on that question, because I think it's a really, really important one for us to think about, to not only think about how on the topic of like advocacy and social change, how do we change those who are currently purchasing, but thinking about the future people who will be buying and using clothes. So thank you for your presentation. Can we kind of give a warm round of applause to Siena? And like always, we have our presenter feedback form to provide any feedback on the presentation. And You can also find contact information for all of the presenters in the conference schedule, and feel free to reach out and continue the conversation.